obviously our outcomes are not good. We're having more surgeries, more injuries. But I think we're measuring the wrong stuff or looking at the wrong stuff. There's a
Asking the
lot,
wrong questions.
yeah, there's a lot of smarter people than us that have been trying to figure out arm health for a very long time. And if we're still having a hard time doing it, we're obviously not asking the right questions and looking at the right things, or are and the testing metrics are off in terms of health.
I
I think
agree.
obviously the testing metrics and the questions to ask in terms of performance at the cost of physical health, we're really good at because injury rates are going up, but performance is also going up. So it's the dichotomy.
Velocity is going up, but our
Yeah, it's
pitcher's
like the
better.
dichotomy of good and evil. Everyone says, well, velocity is the reason for arm injury.
Hello, everyone. Welcome. In this video, Richie and I were just discussing the whole topic of arm care. Kind of a hot topic in the baseball world right now, so we wanted to share our thought process, the concerns we have, some of the things that change, some questions that I think would be more helpful to answer or to ask than the questions we're currently asking around the topic. So really, the goal is to spark some good debate, have a discussion about it, and to hopefully share our knowledge and some of the successes that we've been having lately with our approach to the issue, and just getting people to understand the big picture, 10,000 foot view of what's going on, and then later we'll do a part two, maybe a part three, talking about some more specific things, maybe some case studies, client successes that we've had in the past. But if you guys like this, please comment, like, subscribe. Let us know what other content you'd like us to put out there. Thanks again. Hopefully, you guys enjoy.
Record on this computer. Recording in progress. All right. I like where your tangent was going right before we started the call,
Right.
so
Well, I
run with
guess
it.
the can of worms is opened right now, and kind of a hot topic in the baseball world right now with all the arm injuries going on, and there's so much speculation about like, oh, well, it's because of the pitch
Yeah,
clock
that
or
was yeah.
this,
What's the cause?
right? Like, do we know? Like, Richie, do you have the answer for the million
Um,
dollar question? Why
no.
do why do 16-year-olds tear their UCL?
Oh, we're
Why
talking we're talking everybody. I mean,
why I mean, like, it's not a major, it's not, that's the thing, is it's like we can talk about the issue at the major league level, but it's not coincidental that, and I don't know the actual numbers, but you could definitely look it up, like the increases of injury rates has gone up a lot in the last 20 years, I would say. Like, I don't have the actual numbers, but like at youth sports, college, pro, I think arm surgeries, it's gone up. But
mhm.
then all those big leaguers that are, I mean, I guess it's like the perfect game was founded in what, like early 2000s or something like that.
Yeah, I don't even know if it was around when I was that age, like '05, '07. I don't think it was then.
I'm pretty sure I was, because I'm 28, I'm pretty sure I was one of the first perfect game
First
generations
first gen.
where they had like
Um,
10U and so, I don't know, like I think that's a part
yeah,
of
I
it,
mean,
but
I think it's deeper.
maybe this is more of a side note.
Yeah, I think it's deeper than that. Obviously, our outcomes are not good. We're having more surgeries, more injuries. But I think we're measuring the wrong stuff or looking at the wrong stuff. There's a
Asking the
lot,
wrong questions.
yeah, there's a lot of smarter people than us that have been trying to figure out arm health for a very long time. And if we're still having a hard time doing it, we're obviously not asking the right questions and looking at the right things, or are and the testing metrics are off in terms of health.
I
I think
agree.
obviously the testing metrics and the questions to ask in terms of performance at the cost of physical health, we're really good at because injury rates are going up, but performance is also going up. So it's the dichotomy.
Velocity is going up, but our
Yeah, it's
pitcher's
like the
better.
dichotomy of good and evil. Everyone says, well, velocity is the reason for arm injuries. It's like, well, yeah, but not just because guys throw harder. It's like systemic. We're only getting good at increasing performance and not even asking questions about health, really, or we're asking the wrong questions.
Well,
Well, if your rotate,
velocity,
if your rotator cuff's strong, you should be healthy as you throw harder, is the questions they ask right now.
I mean,
Or
not to point fingers, but like look at the studies done in the 90s by like you know who, but right? Like they're testing Olympic pitchers and they're looking at all these markers of like kinematics and sequencing and stuff, and then they're looking at like muscle activity of certain muscles during certain exercises, and then they're determining the because like the most commonly, I mean, I tore my supraspinatus muscle, and that's the rotator cuff muscle. It's like the most commonly torn. So then it's like, all right, well, does correlation equal causation? Like, did you tear your rotator cuff because you weren't doing full can scaption exercises, and you weren't doing your what's
well,
the one
yeah,
like the
yeah. I
Mo
mean,
Money or whatever? What's that one?
like, I, yeah, I'd say
You know the
we
study I'm talking about though, right?
uh-huh, uh-huh, I know exactly that study. I probably did a report on it. I
Right.
did a report on scaption, the plane scaption in undergrad.
But think about
Um,
what plane that's in. It's a helical angle.
mhm.
Sorry, I'm getting sidetracked, but I don't
No,
know.
but
I
you're
agree.
right.
It's like we're not asking the right questions. Like
And I
I
just
did,
don't think we have the right ability to measure things still. Like everyone's measuring strength because that's the only thing that you can really measure with AI or with machine learning or without bias.
objectively, right? Like you can
Yeah, strength, blood flow, temperature. I mean, there's not a ton more than some of those that you can measure. Like you can't objectively measure posture, and you can't technically objectively measure range of motion unless you put someone in a expensive machine. Like technically, right? It's not a very
right.
accurate. You're not. It's
Well,
not very
our
accurate.
range of motion tests are dirty. Like they're not accurate, right? Or accurate's the right word.
Um,
Reliable and accurate, right?
Reliable. Yeah, I mean your range of motion numbers could be reliable, but
They're not accurate though, because we're testing it the same way with the same person and it's the same tester. Then there is some reliability, I
some
would say.
reliability, but there's human error still.
Yeah, but we
And
know
that's
that.
yeah, I mean, but I think that's why they still strength is still king because that's the only way you can get human error out of measuring. Um, that keeps you from asking more questions in a way because now you think that it's an end all be all strength thing.
You stop asking questions there once you find that the rotator cuff's weak or whatever, the low
And
trap.
the and for
You're like, all right, we just
me,
got to do the low trap program. And got to do
I
the
mean,
scap
yeah,
routine.
for me, for me, in the 10 years I've been doing this, the less I've been doing arm care, the more healthy my pitchers are.
I would agree with that. Yeah, I mean, I haven't been doing it as long as you, but I feel like I'm at a point now where like a pitcher comes to me and they're in pain. I'm pretty confident that within like a few weeks or a few months, like they're not going to be in pain and they're probably going to be performing at a higher level. But
Yeah.
before, when I was doing my rehab, it was like I did months and months of all the right exercises, right? Like one of the most well-known baseball PTs in the country didn't work, like the program wasn't what I needed. I don't remember getting like a posture assessment. I mean,
No, and I get
I wasn't
like
looked at without my shirt, like
pot
I think that's
pot.
valuable.
Yeah, I mean posture's still going to be looked at pretty contrarian. I would say even if someone's going to refute posture as a effective measurement tool or assessment tool, you can just kind of say that you're using it for just checks and balances to make sure that the hip flexion measure that you're getting is as accurate as it can be. And then I guess if they're welcoming enough, you can kind of explain to them the nuances behind it of why you don't know if that's a true hip measure or shoulder measure, and that's another whole side conversation.
Yeah, relative motion.
Probably
Talk
for
about
the
relative
mentorship
motion.
group really first. I feel like I need to explain it to some clinicians first and try to get good at that before I try to explain it to the general athletic population. But I think if you have and this is gonna sound pretty arrogant, but if you have in my opinion, a decent understanding of how the human body moves and how it reacts to its outside stimuli, then I think you need to look at posture.
And just understanding what posture is. Like
Yeah,
we're looking at a moment in time where we can see what shape you're in. I
yeah,
don't know. I always you know me, like I always nerded out on functional anatomy, and like when I was in PT, I would be trying to understand like what muscles were doing what. I feel like that was always like an important aspect for me to understand. But I think we focus so much on like muscles, these straight planes, like oh yeah, that's a straight line. And it's like, no, it's not. Like it's a turn, it's rotation. So
yeah,
once I started understanding that, I was like, you see way more possibilities, different options that could potentially help. But before I felt like I was so limited in my ability to help people because I only saw things from like the perspective of the muscle activity, or this muscle's tight, this muscle's
yeah.
weak. But realizing that if you don't have the adaptability in your, let's talk about rib cage and pelvis because that's
Okay.
what arm care is a lot to do with.
Yeah. Ding,
But
ding,
just like
ding.
if you're one shape, everyone's a cylinder, but if your cylinder can't be pliable, your ribs are too stiff. So then
Yeah.
now when you get your arm up to do your external rotation or your I's, T's, and Y's, your rib cage is not moving the way it should. Like it never had the right starting condition. You weren't even starting from the right train track, so to speak,
Yep.
like the train versus the tracks. And we're
Yep.
always blaming the engine and the train and like blaming muscles for why you test weak. But if you get a structure that can actually adapt to different positions. So a throw, like a pitch is the best example of this because there's these extreme freakish range of motion that you're getting into. And if we're not talking about the literal shape changes that have to happen in the rib cage and the pelvis, the foot, like literally the whole body, if you're looking at it from a reductionist model of like, oh, these straight planes and muscles are pulleys, bones are levers. You're not understanding the shape of bones. Your shoulder joint, like the socket, it's facing a certain way. And like we can talk about individual structure. Everyone's going to be slightly different. Some people's shoulders are more retroverted, some people's shoulders are more antiverted, or but you have to think about that. Like that's why we use the range of motion tests because we can put someone on a table and the table acts as a constraint. So now the bones are like in a more stable position. And then when we take the joint and we move it, we can start to see I mean, we talk about orientations because the pelvis is dumped forward. That's going to change the angle of the hip socket. So now there's certain ranges of motion that are either more available or less available, just given the literally like the physical space of where bones are. I don't think that gets talked about enough. If you reposition someone and give them better starting conditions, like you put the train tracks where they need to be, and then you can move in a better pattern. Now all of a sudden we don't need to blame the muscles because they were never the culprit. They were just the victim. You know, like I didn't tear my rotator cuff because my supraspinatus is weak. I tore it because there wasn't enough physical space between the bones to adapt to like different changes in arm angles and different forces that are applied, right? Like you have to
That's
manage
gold.
the shape changes to be able to handle forces and to get to where you're wanting to go, right? Like
Yeah. I
it's
mean, that is gold right there.
it's not dead guy
It's
anatomy.
it's tough to say because I don't want to come off condescending or anything, but and I mean, I guess I'm talking about myself because I went to college and studied everything as levers and pulleys and but in hindsight, it just doesn't make any fucking sense. Excuse my French.
It never made sense to me, if I'm being
Like,
honest.
how can you how can you look at a guy going down a mountain throwing a baseball and say that's lever and pulleys?
It's a turn.
Yeah, 100%.
It's all turns.
It just it kind of blows my mind, and I'm speaking about myself, not other people. It just blows my mind that like I used to use that. Oh yeah, he can throw like that, and he's 11 places. Like no, now it
Just
makes
watching it in slow motion, you can see. Like
now it
if you
makes
watch someone,
zero sense. It makes zero sense to me to the point like yeah, like again, it looks like I'm taking this way more seriously than I am because I just kind of laugh when people talk about because I mean I hear it every day. People talking about lever and pulleys and they're talking about throwing or hitting. I'm just like, no,
it's not a straight plane.
that makes no sense.
It's not an arc.
It's
It's
gonna
not an arc,
confuse you. It's not an arc. It's gonna confuse you. And like
right?
that's I feel like that is as
It's so
much
confusing.
as much as we have identity crises now with what we're doing and how we're trying to do it, it's at least I feel pretty confident in at least I know what the human body's not doing. It's not moving like a freaking robot, lever and pulleys and like a catapult system.
Right? I mean, just think about it. Like turn your what's the that turn your thumb down and then try and raise your arm overhead. It gets stuck. Like you in order to get your arm overhead, it's a turn. You have to
Yep.
rotate. But yeah,
Because you're
so that's
because
what
you're
arm
helical
care
shape.
that's arm care in my opinion. Is like understanding those turns and then being able to assess someone and realize get an understanding of their starting conditions
Yeah.
and their structural bias and then being able to see the I mean this is something that I'm trying to get better at but like understanding where they started from and then the sequences of steps that got them to where they are, right? Because
Yeah.
like there's two strategies for movement. There's only one plane of movement. Everyone has a certain structure that was given to them by their genetic determinants or whatever you want to think about it.
Uh-huh.
From there, we just need to do a better job of identifying like what that structure actually looks like, what shapes do they
Yep.
have access to, what shapes do they not have access to, and then putting them in an environment or like creating the available shape spaces, like literally like physical spaces that oh you're too compressed up top. So let's put you in a position where when you exercise, when you breathe, or when you perform the activity, we're naturally going to get the shape change we want because of the forces that we're imparting into the
Mm-hmm.
system or whatever you want to think about it, right?
It's
Like
just
we're just reverse engineering and giving them the force application that will undo the put them back in a better starting position, right?
and
That I don't know.
it all comes back to improving their breathing excursion really based on whatever shape they have.
So that would be an interesting discussion about like, so why do we, from your perspective, why do we care so much about breathing? Like if someone can't fully expand or like to literally like open and close the rib cage and as they breathe and to get that like a dynamic rhythm to it, why is that so dangerous and
Well,
inefficient? It's
one,
inefficient, right?
yeah, well, yeah. One, it's you're not going to be able to capture the range of emotions needed in a broader sense because you're going to be if you don't have a proper breathing excursion going through whatever movement context you have, you're not going to be able to capture the range of motions needed for that. You might get some of them, but you're not going to get all the range of motions needed for that task. So let's use like baseball pitcher, for example. You have a narrow right-handed pitcher with a pretty closed down right pump handle. They're not going to have access to internal rotation. We
I
can
don't
go
think people know what the pump handle means.
that's you're probably right. So
I guess that would be another discussion to talk about like
yeah,
pump
so
handle versus bucket
if someone
handle
if someone
mechanics.
has like a compressed upper right rib cage and they're trying to throw a baseball,
Upper chest wall, I guess you'd say.
yeah, they are going to not be able to access enough of a specific range of motion that is needed to get, I mean, this gets really funky. Get the wave of propagated energy from the ground to the baseball efficiently enough
99% water, 1% stuff.
and and it can and that in turn can one cause timing issues so your mechanics are going to be changed
Yeah, you can't create the shape in the time constraint.
So
You're too slow
pretty
to
much
adapt.
yeah, pretty much in a 4D world, your timing's going to be off, and that can cause a whole variable of whether it's
Now you
mechanical,
can't throw strikes. Now you can't spin the
yeah,
baseballs
or
efficiently.
or it's injury based and there's a focal point of stress from that wave hitting the elbow and not being able to propagate all the way through the baseball. So now you have elbow pain or bicep, like distal bicep pain.
Because something has to rotate, right? Like you can't
Mhm.
move without internal and external rotation.
So for me, I'm a great example. I just went and saw Kay the other day. Been playing golf, been having major golfer's elbow, a little medial epicondylitis, and something going on in there. And I had 5 degrees of shoulder internal rotation. And after a bunch of manual therapy at my right thumb, it got to like 45, 50. And
So you did
so
a mobilization for your thumb and your shoulder internal rotation got better?
yeah, because
Oh.
of me making changes, not having a right shoulder, front shoulder to be able to shallow the club. So I was coming steep over the top and a lot of focal stress here and not being able to get out to the club head. So I banged up my elbow. I played golf yesterday, so that's 2 days after seeing him. Just
Felt better.
the ability to have a proper breathing excursion, access the proper range of motion that I need to complete the task allows, even with still have pain in there because I banged it up pretty bad. There's probably some inflammation of the bone, but having the proper range of motion allows me to send that and propagate that energy wave appropriately through my body, and my body can handle that because it's strong enough.
Well, think about someone's compressed. Where is your container of fluid? Like you're literally just a big bag of fluid with bones that form structural constraints. If you're compressed, so let's say that you're trying to throw a baseball and your neck is tight, like your upper thorax, your upper chest wall, between the shoulder, whatever, like that part of the skeleton
Hmm.
is compressed. So are you gonna have more space to move into or less space to move into?
It depends on where you're trying to move.
But like
Because
you have to get your arm into some sort of a throwing slot, right? So if your arm is here, I'm talking to people that like don't follow the model, but like
uh-huh,
if you're trying to occupy this physical space with your arm, let's say like 90 degrees of
uh-huh,
shoulder abduction, and you have to have something that's gonna push your arm up there, and then you have to have the space for your arm to actually sit on the joint. So like the shoulder blade has a rib cage that's expanded so it can, because you think about like when you do a front squat, what's the bar resting on?
front of your
Your
shoulder.
collarbone, but it's air. Like it's literally a volume of air that you compress the fluid below to push it upward. And then if you're compressed upward, then the fluid's not going to go up. It's just going to stay down. So like people that have bicep pain or labrum tears, rotator cuff tears, thoracic outlet, like all those symptoms that are really, really common in baseball right now. We're talking about like 4D representations of time and space. You can't increase the amount of volume in
Hmm.
that part of your skeleton. You literally don't have a chance to get your timing right, to create momentum going through the baseball. It's very inefficient to move. And then now we're relying on all this muscle activity when we should be relying on momentum and like inertia from the guts accelerating down a hill. What happens when
Every big league hitter or pitcher I work with wants to feel as effortless as they can and as relaxed as they can when they're completing rotation.
conservation of energy? The guy that, yeah, like I had a cool text from a parent last night that really grateful because her son had been dealing with, I mean, like for a long nagging arm pain, never
Yeah.
able to complete a full season without getting tired. But you see the way he used to throw and just like really high effort, like so many moving parts, not handling the internal forces or like
Yeah.
breaking against the ground very effectively. And he was throwing like over 70% strikes, which for him, like he was kind of struggling with strike throwing percentage. And he threw 97 pitches, which is like his career high for the
Nice.
season. And his mom said that like he'd still looked smooth and
Hell yeah.
not like overexerting himself by the end of it. So like that's key performance indicators that I care about. I don't care what your peak velocity is if you can't throw a strike and if you're only touching it like
Yep.
every 2 weeks or whatever. Like, what's
And
your
then
average velocity
Yep.
through the whole
And
season?
then I think that gets full circle back to the beginning. talking about the arm care epidemic is because I think that's a harder feel and a harder thing to chase. And so this max effort, and like I'm not saying we're not trying to have guys throw max effort, but it's max effort speed
Oh, he's
wise
throwing
with
harder too. I didn't mention that. He's throwing
it
harder.
it's maximum throwing velocity with as little perceived muscular effort as possible. I mean, there's some leeway there either way. Like that's
Yeah,
the guys that survive and the guys that don't get hurt throw like that. And the guys that hit the best swing like that. It's not, I mean, Bruce Lee be like water.
right? Literally, it is water. Yeah,
Every big league hitter I know does not grip the bat until the last possible. They want to be looking off in the distance as relaxed as they can until the last possible second, and they grab the bat and they narrow their eyes in on the ball, and that's when they create all the internal rotation. They want to be as like relaxed and ER'd as they can until the
right.
last possible second. And that's the same thing with swinging. I mean, that's any high motor skill
Golf,
rotational sport. Golf, if you want to hit the ball a long way, it's late speed. It's not create the speed early. It's late speed through the golf
acceleration.
ball. Yup. Should be way effortless. And
That's
like,
the way I teach kids to throw, and then they usually end up throwing harder because of it.
yeah, anyone that's played any level of even like high school sport doesn't have to be that high level. Like parents can equate to this really easy. Some of the times that you threw the best or hit a homer or did the best that you did, you don't really remember the feeling because it was effortless.
You don't feel anything when
It
you're
was
getting
not
relative
perceived
motion.
effort. Yes. Yeah, when you have relative motion, and then we can go real down a real weird wizard rabbit hole and talk about how potentially one day we can deliver people to flow state quicker
Right?
by manipulating range of motion. But
And that talks about breathing too, like this stuff is
mhm,
all systems are connected. So if you get a more dynamic rib cage and you can actually use your diaphragm to breathe,
mhm,
like now we're talking about the vagus nerve, which is your autonomics, like
mhm.
blood pressure, heart rate, tissue temperature, like digest, all this stuff. And like all we did was just get your rib cage to move the way it was designed
Oh
to,
yeah.
and your
You don't.
pelvis to move the way it was designed to.
Yep. And I think that's what in our goal to reach maximum throwing performance, we've kind of thrown some of those universal principles out the window and really only narrow down on a couple variables, which is why when you go too extreme, as I feel baseball training has, you reap the risks and way too many people having surgery, but
Well, like stream, you mean just like the emphasis on velocity and recruiting, right?
Yeah, I mean, I don't honestly really like to say the emphasis on velocity because, like, this summer, all my guys coming to see me, our emphasis is velocity.
Yeah. Well, but that's the
Be,
time to do it though.
yeah, I mean, I think it's deeper than that. I think it's the inner workings and the mindset behind the industry being too cocky in our thought process of it's easy to increase velocity. And it's like, yeah, it's easy to just increase velocity, but it's
Short term,
hard to increase velocity healthy and
sustain it.
sustain it and not, be able to go to bed at night because you have a guilty conscience. But they're not like that's the thing is like the weight room, the S&C, the PT, like especially S&C side, they're not getting in trouble if people blow out.
Nope.
I've never had a client that I've had blowout leave. They all come back,
Knock on wood.
which is probably not a good thing. But I mean, that's probably everywhere, right? So it's like, oh yeah, TJ, it's not the strength coach's fault. Oh, you had a bad back and the PT and the strength coach rehabbed your back by having you do dead bugs and band walks for 18 months straight, and then you go blow out. Yeah, it's not their fault. They got your back healthy at the cost of your fucking elbow, but I need to stop cursing on these calls. You're gonna have some editing
I didn't
stuff to
edit out
do.
the last one either.
Just don't put on YouTube. Just don't say it's good for kids.
Oh, there's no way.
All right.
Yeah, I mean, that's just like key performance indicators, right? Like, yeah, you want to throw hard, but would you rather have really mediocre college career? Like, okay, you signed to a D1 school,
Yeah.
probably never gonna play,
Yep.
not gonna pitch in the big leagues. Like maybe you get drafted, 8 years in the minors or whatever. Or would you rather like I mean, Verlander was talking about this. He was like, "Yeah, if I was trying to get recruited now, like out of high school, like I would." He said he's like, "Yeah, I was goofy. Like I moved bad. I wasn't coordinated. I didn't throw hard. And he was like, and then my junior year of college, I started throwing really, really hard. It wasn't because he started lifting weights or he did this
Hmm.
velocity program. He's like, yeah, I literally just matured into my body and I learned how to throw. So that's my goal of working with kids. It's like, if you're a stud athlete, which like I've worked with some studs,
Yeah.
if you're a really good athlete and you're staying healthy, you're able to like practice your sport rather than recovering from an injury, you're probably going to progress to
Yeah.
like throwing hard,
That's a,
in my opinion. But if you're chasing the velocity and like you're selling out these max effort throws and these max effort lifts, because I mean, think about it. Like you and I both know that these 18-year-olds or 22-year-olds or whatever, like they can put themselves through worst training, like overtraining and like doing all this ineffective stuff, and they'll get
hmm.
away with it for a period of time. Like
Yep.
these 16-year-olds that are like doing these max effort lifts, like it'll
Yep.
work for a little bit, and then eventually you'll lose the adaptability of your rib cage and your bone structure, and everything just gets stiff and locked up, and then now you don't have relative motion. Now just simply getting to a release point is incredibly inconsistent, and it's
Yeah. Yeah.
and then your
That's,
velocity starts to go down. You tear your UCL, you get a labrum surgery,
that's the
thinking that, oh yeah, now it'll fix it and I'll come back throwing harder. That's what I hear a lot. It's like, oh yeah, I'll just get Tommy John, I'll throw harder. I was like, the reason why they're throwing harder is because they did a ton of work to address the whole like systemic issues that were going on.
yeah.
Like the kid that I worked with that had Tommy John, like I saw him at a showcase, his showcase profile from senior year. He topped out at 79, and then I texted him and he was like, yeah, I've been sitting like 83 to 86. I topped out at 87. And he's like, oh, I got to get 90. I was like, dude, you realize that like you were throwing it in pain for like 2 or 4 years or whatever. Now you have the most innings on your junior college team. You have like a low 3 ERA for your first year back. Don't worry about throwing 90 right now. Let's just
Yeah.
celebrate the fact that like you're literally throwing way harder than you were in high school, and you're pain free. So it's like, what else can you ask for, right? Like you have to be realistic with your timeline and your expectation. But for me, like that process, it was a lot of breathing. Like the guy was doing before he started working with me, he was doing group training where they'd have like 5 or 10 guys doing the same workout. The goal was like, all right, you're doing trap bar deadlifts. And if you get to 20 reps, you'll add more weight. And I'm just
It
like,
just
well,
makes my
dude,
skin
like
crawl. It just
that's
makes me
why
want to
you lost
punch a
all of your
baby.
internal rotation. That's why you're stiff as a board. Like I have a
Yep.
video of him. He literally has one segment of a spine. Like his spine is like one unit. It doesn't have any relative motion. And then his elbow hurts and he doesn't throw hard. And it's like, all right, well, we improved all that stuff. Now all of a sudden you're throwing pain free. His off speed has
Yep.
good spin. It's just like it's mind boggling to me how we blame muscles when like you probably got hurt because you had too much stiffness or like too
Hmm.
much muscle activity where you don't want it. I don't know. My
That's just
rant
not,
of the day, I
it's
guess.
not, yeah, it's just not what's being said. That was fantastic. I think next time
But a
we
good
should,
starting stopping point, I guess.
yeah, I think next time we talk, uh, relative motion specifically, and then that can segue into like arm care specifics, and we can use my submarine guy as the example.